If you are someone who subscribes to HITC Sevens and regularly tunes into the channel, you might have noticed that we have a bit of a series running at the moment, taking a look at various high-profile football managers' best and worst signings of all time. Today sees the turn of Sir Alex Ferguson for the first time, focusing on the finest piece of business that the Scot pulled off throughout the duration of his trophy-laden 39 years in management. Fergie is best remembered for his 27-year stint in charge of Manchester United, where he built a dynasty, winning 13 Premier League titles among 25 other trophies. The springboard for that success had been 8 years at Aberdeen though, where Ferguson's achievements were just as impressive. He successfully knocked Celtic and Rangers off their perch during his time at Pittodrie, where he won 3 Scottish Premier Division titles, in addition to beating Real Madrid in the final of the 1982-83 European Cup Winners' Cup. As ever, the list is weighing up Ferguson's best signings, not the best players signed by Ferguson. So, cost, impact and influence, talent, performance and sell-on value are all taken into account. Given the length of Sir Alex's time in management, naturally inflation has to be taken into account with regards to some of those factors. And since he orchestrated so many fantastic transfers, there will be some honourable mentions later on. Without further ado though, here are Alex Ferguson's 7 best signings of all time. Edwin van der Sar. Getting us started in 7th place is a man who is already 34 years old and not far of turning 35 when he signed for Manchester United. A seasoned professional whose talents were no secret to anyone in Europe, Van der Sar won the Champions League a decade before he arrived at Old Trafford, and he had been the Netherlands' number 1 throughout that time. Having spent just under 10 years starring for Ajax, Alex Ferguson tried to bring the wiry 6'6" number 1 to Manchester United in 1999, following the departure of Peter Schmeichel. The fee involved at the time was £5 million, but Van der Sar ended up signing for Juventus instead. He struggled inch or in, and following 2 seasons at the club, he was sold to Fulham for £7 million as Juve replaced him with Gianluigi Buffon. Van der Sar was a class act at Craven Cottage at a time when Manchester United often looked unsettled between the sticks. In 2005, Ferguson finally got his man, and with it a solution to his goalkeeping dilemma, and all for just £2 million. Van der Sar proved to be an inspired piece of business. Not only was he a world-class goalkeeper and a fantastic communicator who dominated his 6-yard box and had magnificent distribution, he was also a top-class professional who set his standards sky high in every training session until the day he hung up his gloves. Fergie adored Van der Sar and heaped praise upon him at every possible opportunity. When the Dutchman finally retired, just before turning 41, Fergie begged him to stick around for another year. But for the 6 years he did play alone, his impact, and all for £2 million, Van der Sar deserves to feature. Steve Bruce. Some of Alex Ferguson's best work in the transfer market, with 1 or 2 notable exceptions, came in regard to centre-backs. From Gary Pallister to Nemanja Vidic, the wily old Scot certainly had an eye for central defenders, but perhaps Manchester United's single most impressive centre-back signing was Steve Bruce. Renowned for his rampaging and occasionally rash approach to the position during his time at Norwich City, Ferguson saw a diamond in the rough, and he signed Bruce just as he was beginning to mature, aged 26. Bruce shook off his hot-headedness at Old Trafford, becoming an incredibly consistent and integral part of Ferguson's early era at Manchester United. Bruce also became a frequent goalscorer during his time at the club, typically from the penalty spot, although it was 2 headed goals against Sheffield Wednesday in the inaugural Premier League campaign that proved decisive in winning Sir Alex his first Premier League title, and Manchester United's first top-flight title since the 1960s. Bruce might not always have been the most elegant of centre-backs, but he was remarkably effective. Signed for just £825,000, he went on to play more than 400 games for Manchester United, he scored more goals for the club than Nani, and he won 12 trophies. A brilliant centre-back, a fantastic leader, and a bona fide bargain. He had to feature. Dennis Irwin. When selecting his own personal all-time 11, Alex Ferguson famously said that Dennis Irwin would be the only player who he was certain he would include. The right-footed left-back spent 12 years at Old Trafford, and you could count on one hand the number of bad games that he had during that time. Celebrated for his versatility, consistency, and occasionally brilliant free kicks, Irwin was a manager's dream. Born in Cork, Irwin first arrived in England as a junior at Leeds United. He played 82 times for the team from Yorkshire before they allowed him to join second division rivals Oldham Athletic on a free transfer. That would prove to be a very poor decision indeed, and 4 years later, Irwin joined Manchester United for a fee of just £625,000. Over the next 12 seasons, the Irishman made over 500 appearances, becoming arguably the finest left-back of the Premier League era. For a fee of just £625,000, he must go down as one of the greatest signings in the history of the English game, and he's only restricted to 5th place by the fullback tax, which dictates that a fullback isn't as important as a forward or midfielder. Harsh, I know, but I don't make the rules. Cristiano Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo is without a doubt the best player that Sir Alex Ferguson ever signed, and many people might argue that he is his best ever signing. Certainly, from an economic standpoint, that would be an accurate assessment. Ronaldo joined Manchester United in the summer of 2003 from Sporting Clube de Portugal for £12.24 million, aged only 18. That might seem like a bargain of the century now, but at the time, it made Ronaldo the most expensive teenager in the history of the British game, and initially, some were sceptical. Ronaldo had arrived following a drawn-out transfer saga, which had seen David Beckham join Real Madrid rather than Barcelona, which then saw Barcelona poach Manchester United target Ronaldinho, and ultimately Manchester United signing Cristiano Ronaldo instead. That simple twist of fate proved to be a blessing in disguise, and within 3 years of his arrival, Ronaldo was one of the best players on the planet. Ronaldo's 2007-08 campaign is among the finest any player has experienced in the history of Manchester United, and had he stuck it out at Old Trafford for a longer period of time, I've no doubt he would have taken top spot. Unfortunately, Ronaldo departed after 6 seasons in the Premier League, only 3 of which were him at his awe-inspiring best. He commanded a then world record fee of £80 million, proving what a magnificent signing he had been, but he still proved to be a bargain for Real Madrid as well. Peter Schmeichel. It's often said that goalkeeper is the single most important position on the pitch, and whilst no doubt debatable, I tend to think there's some truth to that claim. For that reason, perhaps it shouldn't come as a surprise that some of Sir Alex Ferguson's best and worst signings just so happened to make a living between the sticks. Peter Schmeichel was the greatest goalkeeper that Fergie ever had at his disposal, and also one of the greatest signings in the modern history of the English game. The cheapest signing this seven, Schmeichel joined the Red Devils from Brondby for a fee of just £505,000. Of course, £505,000 in 1991 is a lot more than £505,000 in 2021, but it was still an absolute bargain, even without the benefits of hindsight. With hindsight, however, in the year 2000, Ferguson described the signing as the bargain of the century. An authoritative figure between the sticks, Schmeichel was a daunting prospect for any centre-forward bearing down on goal. Famed for his unorthodox star jump saves, Schmeichel had fantastic reflexes and athleticism, and he is the only goalkeeper to have ever been named as the Premier League Player of the Season. Schmeichel spent 8 seasons at Old Trafford in total, and could reasonably be described as having won Manchester United double-digit point returns every season, or close to that number, which proved to be the difference in numerous title races. An unbelievable signing, the Great Dane takes bronze. Eric Cantona. I suspect that if Alex Ferguson were drafting this 7 himself, he would put Eric Cantona in top spot. The Scot has frequently referred to Cantona as his most important addition in the past, and the player who turned Manchester United into a title-winning outfit. And given that he cost so little, you could make a very good case for him being number 1. Ferguson described Cantona as being tailor-made for Manchester United, particularly at that time, due to his aggression, invention, and attacking intent. He raised the standard at Manchester United, both in training sessions and on the pitch. Upon his arrival, he told his new teammates, "I'm Eric, and I'm here to win the title for you." The Frenchman did just that in his debut campaign, arriving halfway through the season and scoring 9 goals as the club lifted their first top-flight league title in almost 25 years. Much like Irwin, Cantona was a former Leeds United player, except his departure from Elden Road was even more painful for Leeds fans as he went directly to Old Trafford. Cantona had exhibited his talents in Yorkshire, but was considered a bit of a headache due to his eccentricity. Manchester United were only on the lookout for a forward due to Dion Dublin breaking his leg, but at £1.2 million, Fergie decided that Cantona was worth the risk. He became a cult hero at Old Trafford, getting bums off seats every time he received the ball. A magnificent signing, and had he not retired so early, he might well have taken top spot. Honourable mentions. Before I come to top spot, a quick word for the honourable mentions, given that Sir Alex Ferguson made far more than 7 fantastic signings throughout his managerial career. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge some of his signings at Aberdeen, given that those 8 years of his career are unrepresented in the 7 proper. Part of the reason for that is because a number of Ferguson's most important players during his time in Scotland were either signed by Billy McNeill just before he arrived, or were promoted from the team's youth ranks by Ferguson himself. Ferguson's finest work at Aberdeen was in maximising the talents of the young players he inherited, as much as bringing great players in. With that being said, Jim Bett, who joined the club for just £300,000, and club legend Peter Weir, who also only cost £300,000, both came close to featuring, narrowly missing out to Bruce and Van der Sar. In terms of Manchester United signings, there might just be too many to mention, but those that came closest to featuring include the £25.6 million recruitment of Wayne Rooney, who went on to become the Red Devils' all-time leading goal scorer, the £7 million deal that was struck to sign world-class centre-back Nemanja Vidic, the £1.5 million arrival of Manchester United's current first-team manager and former baby-faced assassin Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the £29 million arrival of Rio Ferdinand, also from Leeds United, which may have been a British record fee at the time, but still proved to be tremendous business, and lastly, the acquisition of Patrice Evra for £5.5 million, who rapidly became one of the best left-backs in the world. Those are my most honourable of honourable mentions, but there is still time for your top spot, of course. Roy Keane. I think you could make a case for any of the top 4 topping this 7, but to my mind, Alex Ferguson never made a better signing than Roy Keane, who joined the club from Nottingham Forest in 1993. There are so many reasons why Keane's transfer was pivotal to Ferguson and to Manchester United's future fortunes, but we'll start with the player himself. A perennially underrated player in the years since his retirement, Keane was a world-class midfielder with a fantastic footballing IQ. As a box-to-box player, Keane could break up play, receive the ball on the half-turn, and pick a pass. He might not always have been as easy on the eye or as obviously talented to your average football fan as someone like Paul Scholes or Ryan Giggs, but Keane was often even more important. His passing was precise, his first touch almost never let him down, and his tenacity meant that Manchester United won 99% of midfield battles, despite typically only having 2 players in the middle of the park. Keane's signing was also crucial because before he signed, in 1993, he had been on the verge of joining Blackburn Rovers. Blackburn were an emerging force within the English game at the time, and they still went on to win the Premier League title in 1995 without Keane. Had they managed to sign him though, that entire decade of English football and beyond could have been very different. Keane joined Manchester United instead though, where he became as important as a captain as he was as a player, setting the standards at the club for more than a decade and ensuring that winning mentality was embedded into the fabric of the club. His £3.75 million transfer fee was a British record at the time, but also an absolute bargain for one of the finest midfielders in the history of the British game, and quite possibly the single most important player of the Premier League era. So that's it for today's video, but thank you all as ever for watching. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and also let me know which managers you'd like to see featured in this series in the future, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for the one and only HITC Sevens. Oh, and you can also find me on Twitter or Instagram via the username at HITC Sevens on both platforms, should you feel so inclined.